The Leica SL3 has a completely redesigned menu. In this video, I'm going to show you how I set up my SL3 for photography. It has not been a week since I got my SL3, and I spent most of the time going through the new menu and setting it up perfectly for my personal use. Before we go through the menu and how I set up my camera, I want to tell you about my main philosophy of working with the camera. I have all my cameras, if they are an SL camera or the Q3 or my M cameras, I have all set them up with profiles. And I have basically one starting profile, and then I do little adjustments for different situations. And when I'm out in the field or in the studio, I only have to change my user profiles, and then I'm actually set up for shooting. Before I'm going to show you the menu, I'm going to go through how I assigned my dials and my function buttons. The dials, the new dial on the upper left side is my exposure compensation. If I turn it, you can see here on the scale, the little arrow. On the right hand, on the upper dial, I have my shutter speed. And on the thumb dial here, I have the aperture. If I press the thumb wheel, I can change the exposure mode. I always start in manual because I like to do everything in manual. That's just how I set it up. Then we have those two function buttons up here. The right one up here on the top, I have my ISO settings. If I press here, I can change my ISO settings. And then the second button up here, the second function button, I have my drive mode. So I can go through the drive mode here. Then the joystick, you can also press the joystick. And this is my focus and my exposure lock. Because I have set everything on manual, pressing the shutter will not activate the autofocus, but I still want to use the autofocus, and that's why I set it on the joystick here. This is actually really cool because I can find my focus, I can set my focus, and then I can move the camera, and if I then press the shutter button, the focus sticks where I had it. Because I rarely use the all-over automatic intelligent super duper smart autofocus settings, I mostly use just the field settings, which I like to move around with the joystick, and then when I press it, I have the focus where I actually want it. And on the button just left of the joystick, Leica has assigned to switch between the LCD screen and the EVF, or this is set in my world on auto because there is a sensor. If I cover the sensor, the screen turns off. So I use this for toggling my focus field. So if I move the focus field, for example, up here, I press the button here, it goes back to the center. If I press it again, it goes up to the last position it was. And sometimes you lose the field, and it's down here and you can't see it, then you just press the button once and it's back in the center. Then we have two buttons on the front here. The upper button I use for magnification. I can't show you this right now, but when I press it, I have a digital zoom that helps me take focus. If I'm still want to take focus manually. And the lower button I have assigned to switch between video and photo. If I press it, I'm now in video mode. So I go back to photo mode and we go through the menu now. If I press the menu button once, we come to the newly designed control center. You can see now I have mounted a CF Express card. I have a Sigma lens mounted, an 85mm, because my Leica lens is filming the back of the camera right now. And you can see I have Bluetooth activated and I have turned off my iPhone. So there is no connection to my iPhone and the Leica FOTOS app. So there is no geotagging right now. The lower two rows here of the icons you can arrange yourself. If I go to the upper row from left to right, first I have my exposure mode. I have my focus settings, which are blacked out right now because I have the Sigma lens mounted, and the Sigma lens has here a little switch. When I turn this on autofocus, you can see that now there is AFC, so autofocus continues. Because I want to show you how I truly work, I'm going to leave it in manual. Then I have my focusing field. I have the Leica FOTOS app options. Then on the lower row, I have exposure measuring, drive mode. I have my user profile again. This is the same icon like up here. And I can here format my card. I know some people don't like it to have that here. I have never had an issue. I never accidentally formatted a card, because you of course have to also confirm that you want to format the card. But this, of course, I'm going to say, if you're going to adapt this, this is on your own risk. I have never had an issue. If you press menu again, we jump into the first page of the menu. The first few items are dedicated to focus. So the focus mode, of course, I have set the lens on manual. That's why it's blacked out. If you have a Leica lens mounted, then of course you can change between manual and autofocus. If I switch here the lens, then this turns on. But then I also have the focusing function on my shutter release button, which I want to have disabled. That's why I'm switching to manual. The autofocus mode I have set to field. The autofocus settings, I only want to touch on one item. This is focus 8 and the AF assistant lamp. I have turned this off because that really annoys me, because it takes all the attention on the photographer when the light on the camera goes on. And so this never helped me and actually always annoyed me. If you go back to the first page of the main menu, we are coming to the first exposure setting. We have the exposure metering. I have set this to multi-field. I've actually set this to multi-field on all of my cameras. Sometimes when it's very bright outside, I'm going to change it to highlight weighted, but I usually go with multi-field. The highlight weighted helps you when you really don't want to overexpose the highlights. Sometimes because you have, let's say, a very sunny day and you have a reflection on a window, which actually doesn't bother you. It's on the right lower corner of your picture. And then when you are working with highlight weighted metering, it's going to expose on this highlight part, and then all of the other stuff is underexposed, which of course with the dynamic range of the SL3 you can recover. But if it's underexposed, like several stops, you're gonna get some noise, and to avoid that, I decided to go with multi-field. The ISO settings I have set on auto. Of course, this is only my starting point. Usually I am very fast in changing the ISO manually as well, but as a starting point, I have it on auto. The EV increments are blacked out. This probably has to do with the lens. Drive mode I have set on single. I'm not using continuous shooting because I don't like to have 100,000 pictures. Sometimes, of course, when I do animals or I do rarely sports, then I change that. But most of the cases I'm shooting single. But I want to show you two different settings that are kind of hidden here. I sometimes do interval shooting when I have to do, for example, group pictures where I have also to be on them. I'm not going to do this with a self timer. I do it with interval shooting. When you press it once, when you activate it, basically, you can change the settings. And I have set it to 300 frames, and I have set it to an interval of 1 second. So I have one picture every second. So I have like 5 minutes of time to get into the group picture and go back to my camera. But then I have several pictures that I can choose from, and not only one. Because I have set this now, it will remember that setting. So even though if I go back to single now, it still will be saved. And the next time I'm going to activate interval shooting, it will remember that setting. The same with exposure bracketing. If I activate this, the settings menu pops up and I can go into settings. I have set it to 5 pictures. I do 2 stops difference for each picture. So I have a variety of exposures. But again, I activate now single, and with single activated, it still remembers my exposure bracketing settings. Self timer, of course, turned off. I never use that. White balance I have on auto. The file format, I only shoot DNG. I never shoot JPEGs. The DNG resolution is, of course, large because I want to use all the pixels I have in my 60 megapixel sensor. The JPEG settings actually don't concern me at all, but I want to touch on one thing. If I go into those settings, you have the menu point 3 here, Leica looks. Those are the looks you can download with your Leica FOTOS app. I have made a dedicated video with the Q3 and the Leica FOTOS app. I put the link for this video in the description. So if you're interested in shooting JPEGs and using the new Leica looks, I show you in that video how to install them and use them. It works exactly the same way on the SL3 like in the Q3. If you go back to the main menu, we have noise reduction for long exposure. I have turned that on. I have not tested that yet. I know that from all the cameras, from the SL2, from the Q2 and Q3. When I did astrophotography, it did me a great job. It takes a little bit more time, but the results are amazing, and I'm sure it's going to be the same here. If you're interested in that function, leave me a comment and I will consider doing a video where I compare noise reduction activated and not activated for long exposure shots. The next point is the perspective control. I have turned that off. I think it's a little bit of a gimmick. The sensor format, of course, I used 35mm sensor. I want to use all of my 60 megapixels. Stabilization. I have turned this on because most of the time I'm doing handheld shooting. But remember that, I'm going to talk about that later again. The aspect ratio is 3:2. That's the ratio of the sensor. Flash I will not cover because I never use flash. Now we're coming into the customize control menu. This is where you can customize your buttons and your dials and the joystick and everything. The thing that is a little bit weird in the beginning, when you go into the menu buttons, you're not assigning anything. You're just activating or deactivating all the functions you can assign to a button. If you actually want to change a button, you have to long press it. So for example, if we want to change the function button here, I just have to press it. And then I'm getting all those possibilities to assign the function button. It's different with the dials. If you go into the dials menu, it differentiates between autofocus lenses and manual focus lenses. The SL camera for me is, of course, an autofocus camera. My main settings, my main user profiles, actually 5 of my 6 user profiles are set up for autofocus lenses because I'm usually using autofocus lenses with this camera. Here you have 4 sub-menus. For each exposure mode, you can change how your dials are working. So again, because I am usually working in manual, I only have focused on the manual setup of my wheels. So in manual mode, my thumb wheel, as I told you, is the aperture. The right dial is the exposure and the left dial is the exposure compensation. When you want to change that for different exposure modes, you go into this menu, you go, for example, to aperture priority, and then Leica gives you a suggestion. I'm not using that. Then you have capture assistance. You have info profile 1, 2, 3, and 4. This is basically what you see in your LCD or your EVF. So if I go into my camera here, and I have my lens cap on, that's why it's only black. But basically I can see my first info profile. When I press my function button, which is set to toggle information levels, which is a weird name for this function, it should basically say toggle capture assistant profiles, it changes. So on the first page, I have set only the upper and the lower row of informations and the scale. On the second, I also add the side menu. And now we have a little star at my profile icon. The star indicates that I made a change. The change I made is that I pressed the function button once and that activated the second profile. This is basically not my initial user profile anymore. And that's why there is a little star that indicates that I changed something. If I press the menu button now, I'm seeing that also here I have a star on the other 2 points where I have a user profile. If I go back to my first page and I now go onto the menu, the star disappears and it tells you that's basically my untouched user profile as I have it saved on position 1. But now we want to go through those 4 pages. First page, I have activated the side menu. The next, I have activated the clipping. And the fourth, I have also activated the grid. With each step, I add stuff. And then when I press it again, I'm going to be in the beginning, the first one, which has nothing. And now let's check out how to set those up. If I go in one of those profiles, the settings, I can choose info bars, top, bottom, or right. I have turned it off the first. The grids I have off. The clipping I have off. Focus peaking I have off. The level gauge is the scale. I have it on. and the histogram, I have turned it off. When I go and show you my last info profile, I have turned on everything. On the 5th page of the menu, where we have the storage management, there you have your format menu, and you can format the CF Express card or the SD card, which is grayed out because I have not mounted one at the moment. Then you have the storage options. You can do DNG and JPEG on the CF Express card and the SD card at the same time. So basically you're mirroring the two cards. I'm not doing that. I use first the CF Express card, and if it's full, it moves on to the SD card if I have mounted one. And if you do DNGs and JPEGs, you can do the DNGs on the CF Express and the JPEGs on the SD card. Then you can edit your file name. Basically what you can do, you can edit the first letter of the automated file name. I have set it on L. The reason is that I have set my Q3 on Q. My M I have set to M10 or MM, and my N10M I have set to MM, I think. The reason is I can now see which camera took the picture when I see the file name. Shutter type, I have hybrid, so I have the best of both worlds. I have turned off audio review. If I turn that on, it will show me every time I take a picture, it will show it to me. I don't want that. Group display mode is basically an intelligent organizing tool that organizes the similar shots you took. Then we have live view settings. I didn't touch those as well. The Leica FOTOS app, of course, I have set it on performance mode, which means when my phone is on and it has connection to my phone, I have instant access to features, especially geotagging and synchronization of the time and the time zone I'm in. Pairing is when you do first time pairing, and when you want to delete a device. I have now two devices connected at the moment, my iPad and my iPhone. USB charging I have of course activated because there is no charger in the box. You need to charge through the camera if you don't have an extra charger. The USB mode I have set on select. That means every time I connect a USB cable, it asks me what I want to do, so I can choose whatever I need the moment I'm connecting the cable. I think that's the most comfortable use like this. The Wi-Fi settings I have not touched yet. I have not used it. Now we're coming to the user profiles. I'm going to skip that for a second. I'm going to come to the user profiles in the end. We're going to first look at the camera settings. And here you can see I have display settings on auto. I have power saving turned off. Here you also can turn off the new LED power button if that annoys you. I'm getting used to it. I'm really liking it by now. Here you can see the lens profile. Then I'm European, so I work with meters. Acoustic signals I have very low. Everything else I have turned off. Date and time. I'm also European, so I'm on a 24-hour time format. Here you can reset the numbering. I have not done that. You can automatically clean your sensor. I have not done that either. You can do pixel mapping. The newer cameras from Leica have that function. And here you can reset the camera. There are several different things you can reset at once, which I'm not going to do because I finally have set up my camera. And then we have camera information. If you go in there, we're getting the firmware information, the lens firmware information, and some other information, so what have you. And on the second side, we get the copyright information. Because this camera did not get the content authentication feature that the M11P has, I highly recommend to enter your information here. You get two fields where you can enter information, the information field and the artist field. In both of the fields, I would highly recommend to enter your name, so it is implemented in the EXIF data of every photo you take. Now with the language, we are at the end of the main menu of the Leica SL3. So let's go back and look at the user profiles. On top, there is the basic profile. This is the profile Leica provides. And then the second menu point is Manage Profiles, and then your individual profiles are next. When we go into Manage Profiles and we go into Rename Profiles, we can see we have 6 profile slots available. I have them all filled up. My first profile I call Handheld. because I usually use my camera holding it in my hand. This is for both for photo and video. So it is important to know that you do not have different profiles for photo and video, even though you can switch between photo mode and video mode. We don't get 2x6 profiles, we get 1x6 profiles, which stores all information for photo and video. So I basically have set up in my handheld profile both starting profiles for photo and video. So it does not matter if I'm working in video mode or photo mode. When I'm choosing my profile number 1, my handheld profile, it is set up both for photo and for video. We now talk only about photo, of course. So what is the difference between the handheld profile and the tripod profile? The difference is that in the second profile, the tripod profile, the stabilization is turned off, because sometimes when you have it turned on and the camera is still, it still does weird stuff. So I have turned it off for tripod mode. So the moment I put my camera on a tripod, I turn it to the tripod mode. The third profile is my studio profile. I am working here in my studio with 5600 Kelvin lights. So I have set up the white balance to 5600 Kelvin. I have stabilization turned on because in the studio I mostly work handheld. The profiles 4 and 5 are again basically the same profiles. The only different in the profile 4, the stabilization is on because it's the handheld profile, and in profile 5, the stabilization is turned off. The difference to the basic profile 1 is that I have set the ISO to 4000. This is basically my starting point for night photography. And then I have my profile number 6, which is a photo profile only. I have the dials set up like an M camera. So on the left dial, I have the ISO settings. On the front upper right dial, I have the shutter speed settings. And on the thumb dial here, I have the exposure compensation. This is how I set up my Leica SL3 camera. Of course, there's a lot of similarity to my SL2, but of course the SL3 has more functionality, and that's why I completely had to reset up the camera. I hope I could inspire you on how to set up your camera. If you want to adapt how I assigned my buttons and wheels, I have prepared a PDF file for which I put a link in the description. This link points you to my website where you can download the PDF file where you can see how I set up my dials and buttons for photo and for video. If you want to see how I set up my camera for video, check out this next. If you want to see other Leica content, click on this video. Stay curious!